Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lou Weiss with Manufacturing Talk Radio, and my co-host, Tim Grady, sitting down in Atlanta. And this tall gentleman to my right is Tony Uphoff, President and CEO of Thomas Org.
You can call it Thomas or ThomasNet, Lou.
Okay, so there it is. For those who don't know who that is, that was the old green books, which Thomas still doesn't use anymore. So anyway, Tony's here. He was requested to be at the White House about a week ago, and he was the chair for a round table about manufacturing. So we wanted to hear how that went. Tony?
Thank you, Lou. First off, Lou, Tim, it's always great to be on the show. Thanks for having me on. And Lou, as you know, we track so much data, and that data is, to a great extent, a glimpse into the industrial economy. And sure. Every 2 seconds, a buyer selects a supplier on the ThomasNet platform. Every second, an engineer or an architect downloads one of our CAD or BIM files. So collectively, this huge amount of ongoing data gives us some unique insights. And we've started to publish those insights in the form of the Thomas Index report. That's a weekly, right. And you've seen the video. We also have been taking that out into the market where we share it with customers and prospects to better understand trends in digital marketing and understand what's happening around demand. At one of those events, Ann Evans, who's a director of the Department of Commerce, attended and listened to the data and said, boy, I'd really like you to come and chair a roundtable at the White House on trends in U.S. manufacturing. So it was pretty remarkable, and we were hugely honored. So a month after that invitation, there we were at the White House, and they gave us a really interesting opportunity where there were a series of areas that they asked us to address that they felt were really important for congressional leaders, leaders within the Department of Commerce and the Small Business Administration, and then they had also invited some other industry leaders, and they really felt these were important topics to tee up.
Corporate leaders?
Exactly. And so they were companies inside industrial manufacturers based on the congressional districts that were involved. So New York was one. Connecticut was another, and Maine, the state of Maine was another. And so there was some other, folks involved in this, which gave, I think, a really great vibrancy to the roundtable. So it wasn't just me up there reciting what the data shows. It was folks like yourselves, not unlike yourselves, who've been in the industry a long time, that could echo what we're talking about and make it come alive. So the big areas that they were interested in, which kind of fascinated us, we were asked to address the misperception of manufacturing in the United States. And for those of us that have been connected to the industry for a long time, we kind of, I guess, just accept this and we take it for granted. But the average American, if you were to ask what country is the largest manufacturer in the world, they would select China. It's actually not China, it's the United States. If you were to ask the average American whether U.S. manufacturing is growing or shrinking, they would say it's shrinking. It's actually been growing for 118 quarters. If you were to ask the average American, are there more jobs today in U.S. manufacturing or less, they would say less. We're at employment levels of 1949 levels in this country in the U.S. Last year, we created 248,000 jobs in U.S. manufacturing. So we talked a bit about that. Interesting enough, one of the questions I got when I talked about these open jobs, government's very well aware of that. When we talked a little bit about the skills gap, one of the questions I got was, well, hey, are these open jobs white-collar jobs or blue-collar jobs? And it was interesting. I said, I think that's an irrelevant question today. And I think that's one of the problems in this area of perception about our collective industry is that's a dated view of the industry. And I started to use the term, these are new-collar jobs. They're not white or blue-collar. They're both high-tech and skilled labor jobs, and that's what makes them unique. That's where these new jobs are being created. And so fascinating dynamic in and around that.
Tim and I used to, when we started this 5 years ago, we picked up on somebody else's term about dark, dirty, and dangerous. It almost doesn't exist.
It's so true. It is so true. And I think Lou, you and I have talked about this before. I could go on and on about the misperception. I think a lot of it with good intention was created either by industry trade associations related to the industry and market, or an overarching desire that post-war, let's get everybody a 4-year college degree and let's get everybody doing knowledge work because, oh my gosh, it looks like U.S. can't be competitive in manufacturing going forward because of the cost of labor.
Right.
Well, that turned out not to be true. And so I think, again, good intention, but the byproduct of that is we now have this legacy of a lot of confusion and misperception about what is a very vibrant industry and, a lot of really great job opportunities, but not everybody really understands it. And we do run the risk of not creating enough young talent into these industries that are coming up at apprentice levels, let's call it, or young levels, because these are jobs that are a combination of art and science. You can learn science. Art's experiential.
Right.
The understanding of how to do this, you got to spend some time doing it.
One of the things that Tim and I have found over the years is that a lot of the manufacturing organizations and people, small, medium-sized, and even large-size, they don't really fully understand what the problems are in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And, skill gap being one, the economy, the XM Bank, on and on and on. They don't really fully understand how to resolve issues and problems and educate people. And so we've really learned a lot. Am I right, Tim?
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's been a fascinating period of discovery. One of the things that I'm always taken aback by is the digital change in manufacturing, all of the disruptive technologies that are coming in. And I think, Tony, you pointed out in your remarks at the White House that it's more than just the factory floor that's transforming. It's from the C-suite to the loading dock door that's being changed by digital transformation.
Well, interesting enough, Tim, that was actually the number one thing we were asked to talk about, which was interesting to me, right? One of the things that the Department of Commerce in particular was so moved by in terms of some of the data that we started to share is they said, what you're identifying is the factory floor. Most U.S. manufacturers have made that transition. They're competitive on the global stage because they're starting to introduce advanced robotics or the use of technology, and they've really figured that out and are, if anything, accelerating those areas. However, this is the government speaking, they're falling behind in the digital transformation of industrial sales, marketing, and supply chain management, which I thought was kind of fascinating because I thought, I didn't hear, in many respects, my own voice when I was explaining this. I didn't describe it that way, but I thought, wow, isn't it interesting that they see what I'm saying and that they're exactly right. And I think one of the reasons they were so interested in talking with us was there's a concern there that they feel that if the average American manufacturing company continues to fall behind in that area, they're very vulnerable to competition from either foreign competition or companies that have figured that out. We're also starting to see some evidence that private equity firms are very quietly coming in and scooping up these valuable but undervalued businesses that haven't yet made that transition. So the idea of reaching out to new customers and engaging customers. So kind of a fascinating dynamic. And I was both impressed, but also somewhat surprised that they had identified that because we see it, because we work with 10,000 of these companies across the United States. But kind of a fascinating area.
So what was the primary reason? I mean, you gave me 4 reasons, things that they want to talk about. But what was the primary reason that they wanted to have this event? Tim and I have kind of concluded that if you're waiting for the government to help us out, you're going to stand on a very long line.
Yeah.
So the fact that they did this is really surprising.
Yeah.
I don't know how much social media or marketing that they did to get it out, but it did get out to the paper that I read. So that's why you're here.
Yeah.
The question is, what's the purpose? How are they going? And then what are they going to do about this? What did they learn from what you gentlemen?
Well, I'll
gave them?
To a certain extent, I think that's playing out. And I think I can understand some components of what their interest was, and then we have some areas of follow-up and opportunity going forward. There's some areas that I think probably I'll let play out and not to be coy about it, but I think there were some discussions that I would suggest would indicate areas of frustration they might have and things that they'd like to do differently. But I think from both the Small Business Administration and the Department of Commerce, I took back, Lou, and I don't know if this is a fair interpretation, that a part of what they're feeling is they have underserved the U.S. manufacturing industry.
No question.
And again, I can't attribute that as a direct quote of what was said to me. Boy, did I certainly feel that energy. Yeah. And I think a part of what they were interested in is, hey, we get fed a lot of data, some of it interpreted by people with an agenda. We just want to see the data. We want to talk to some folks that are just objectively looking at this. But I certainly came away with a very strong feeling that there was a genuine interest in, how can we do a better job of supporting U.S. manufacturers. There was a quote that I won't attribute that one of the officials said, we think we made a mistake and we underserved U.S. manufacturing in this country.
That's a bold statement.
I don't think I'm disclosing a confidentiality in saying that, but it impressed me. The majority of people we met with were not career political people. There were folks like yourself that came out of serving, industries and building companies, and they're doing political service, and they're trying to do the right thing. Maybe the mechanisms aren't there yet, as you and I have discussed, but I was really impressed with how passionate they are. In terms of follow-up, what may happen from something like this, both groups, the Small Business Administration and the Department of Commerce, have scheduled meetings to come to our offices in New York and further discussions. And I think, what might that look like? I think more of what you and I are doing right now. Maybe some education, maybe some opening up of these discussions. They were very interested in this tour we do, we call Together for Industry, and you've seen these, where we share the data and trends. And I think they'd like to see us go into areas where they're serving constituencies on a regional basis, and what I call that education or highlighting issues or whatever.
See it in action.
I think so.
Yeah, that's very neat.
Yeah.
So who's coming to Thomas?
Folks from senior officials from Small Business Administration and then also Department of Commerce.
Is that the same day that I'm going to be there?
Well, I could arrange that, my friend. I could arrange that. I could just have you come in.
Oh, what a surprise!
But all kidding aside, look, if I back all the way up to go forward, we're hugely honored. Regardless of your political persuasions or anything else, we were just thrilled, and it was a fun experience.
It had to be.
But we came away just really, there was clearly a feeling of genuine interest in wanting to have organizations like ours that have all this data that might really be helpful, and find ways that it can be used to help and to illuminate issues that might be helpful.
Well, not only the data, you have a tremendous reach into the manufacturing.
Absolutely.
I mean, what do you have, 10,000 advertisers?
We're at 10,000 advertisers. As of today, we're at 820,000 active registered users for ThomasNet and growing. And our Thomas Industry Update is, our daily email newsletter is up to 500,000 subscribers.
So that's like 1.3 million?
Yeah, on the average month, we don't mandate registration to use ThomasNet. We strongly encourage it. The average month, we get about 1.6 million to 2 million uses of ThomasNet. So, this is a good-sized audience.
Right.
But as you and I both know, that's probably pretty well representative of the size of the prize, right? If you look at kind of, while consumer standards, that's not a big audience. You start to look at an industry that you and I operate in, that's a pretty healthy chunk of the industry.
Spread out over, East Coast to West Coast.
You got it.
No, it's fabulous. And I think it's something that you should probably do your own radio show. Where have we heard that?
I could learn that from people that know how to do this.
Tony, I'm just wondering, with exports being 15% of the U.S. gross domestic product, did exports come up when you were talking to the folks at the White House? Because we're always on the XM Bank bandwagon to get them fully authorized and functioning. But I think a lot of manufacturers, particularly the small and mid-sized enterprises, say, oh, the dollar's strong, the sales will be down, it's not a good time to export. Oh, the dollar's weak, margins will be down, it's not a good time to export. It's always a good time to have a new revenue stream. Is government really looking at that, and is Thomas really looking at that?
Yes and yes, and you're spot on. And one of the topics of discussion they asked us to address was the interest in global expansion for U.S. manufacturers. So not only is U.S. manufacturing, a healthy industry, we're seeing a reasonable amount of reshoring where, companies are bringing manufacturing, quote unquote, back to U.S. shores. Well,
Right.
if that's happening, by definition, we can also pull share from other countries, right? Think about it, right? This is just a math formula. And so we're seeing a fair amount of that. One of the things that the government believes they're identifying is for small to medium-sized U.S. manufacturers, there's a desire to do it. They may not know how. There can be reasonable complexity.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell the two of you, right, to doing business internationally. You've got currency, you've got language, you've got supply chains, you've got, all kinds of regulatory issues. And I think for a lot of small to medium-sized companies, they're like, that's just too many headaches. I can't deal with it.
Well, I have to butt in on this.
Please.
I was doing import-export sales 30 years ago. 40
Yeah.
years ago. Letters of credit were just a royal pain in the arse, but there were incentives back in the 80s that the government put out to incentivize companies to export.
Yeah.
And one of them was a process called FRISA, I forgot, Foreign something International Sales Association.
Yeah.
And the incentive was huge.
Really?
It was
Interesting.
100% tax forgiveness on every dollar revenue exported.
Where do I sign up for that?
Well,
Yeah.
the Democrats ultimately ruined that. Because they said, well, we're giving it away. We
Yeah.
can't do that.
Yeah.
So let's start another one. So they started another one called something like FRISA, but not. But again, it was another incentive, and that was a 15%.
Okay.
But okay, I'll take the 15%.
Yeah.
But the Department of Commerce and mainly the Department of Commerce really did not know how to market either one of these incentives, and I seriously doubt if they still do.
Well, it's interesting to your point, and Tim, I appreciate you bringing it up because that was a major theme, was how do we help U.S. manufacturers do business globally? So, people forget, it's the U.S. Department of Commerce. International trade is a component of the subdivision of the group. So, we collectively can do a better job there. It's exactly what you just said, though. I think not to speak for Small Business Administration or the Department of Commerce, I think so much of what they were saying to us is we're struggling to get the message out. One of the companies that was attending the event with us and was a representative of the industry itself is a company called American Crane. And Karen Nornheim. Yeah, fabulous. And so she was speaking about issues of women in manufacturing, near and dear to all of our hearts, and you guys do a great job in that area as well. She was talking about how SBA does or doesn't work with U.S. manufacturing. And I think a lot of her comments really resonated with people, where it's not that monies aren't available or services aren't available, it's how they're promoted and easily understood. And so I think I'd like to think maybe one of the outcomes from this, and frankly, we have a responsibility to the industry we serve. How do we do a better job of helping people understand these things?
Just get the message
You
out.
got it. And, it's part of why I was thrilled when you guys said, hey, come on here. I think we owe it to this industry to help people understand these things. And, there's just so much available. But I do think, as you and I talked before we went on air here, the organizing mechanisms, I don't even know how else to describe it. You got opportunities here, you got, support over here, but that organizing mechanism just doesn't quite work as well as we'd all like to see.
It's like having two different size gears with missing teeth.
Right.
It's very
Bringing
similar.
it back to manufacturing.
Let's get it back on track. But it's really amazing, and I would really like to see that the government take a serious look at it. And unfortunately, they are, and I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, so I won't. But they are more interested in the next election than they are in doing the things that they need to do to help the Americans.
It's interesting, Lou, to your point. One of the things that I will say, in spending time there. You know, I'm not somebody who's held political office. I've not spent a lot of time in D.C. Right. I'm a business executive, and I've gone there as a business person, not with a political agenda. Being there was interesting, and being there in an environment where, you know, there's a lot of activity happening. But what was kind of fascinating to me was there was very little talk of 2020. It didn't come up at all. Now, granted, we're not with people, for the most part, that are running for 2020. Right. But it wasn't even discussed much in the conversations. But I hear you. I mean, I think, you know,
it's there.
It is omnipresent, I would assume. Right. And again, I don't come out of that culture. So that idea that I've got one eye running and another eye administrating, I thankfully have not had to live in those environments. I don't know how I would.
I can't imagine why anybody would want to. But that's a whole other issue.
It's beyond me. It's beyond me. Yeah.
So where do you think this is going to go?
Well,
so they're going to come out and visit you.
Yeah.
And maybe the guys in the yellow jackets will be there. Maybe not.
Look at this. Maybe I'll have a yellow jacket by that point.
What size?
Ooh, I'm pushing the envelope.
Wait a minute. Yeah. We can negotiate this. We asked Brad Holcomb of the Institute of Supply Management about 3 years before he got his yellow jacket what his size was.
Okay.
So what's your size?
So what you're saying is I got a chance.
What's your size?
What you're saying?
Yeah.
What's your size?
42 long, my friend.
42 long.
42 long.
I'm going to have to take my little
Hey, you know
yellow.
what? It's interesting. Here's what I'd like to have happen. I can't predict because we don't control these outcomes. I hope it's more of what we're doing right here. I hope, if nothing else, if we can use our, I'll call it power or platform or position in the marketplace to just educate a marketplace, to make it more vibrant, to make resources better understood. I want to advocate for U.S. manufacturing. And I don't need to advocate for U.S. manufacturing because it's failing. I need to advocate for it because it's growing.
Right.
And this is not a failed industry. It's quite the opposite. And so I'm really passionate about this, and I'm hoping that we can continue to serve as an advocate. We continue to serve as a daily habit and resource for industry. Now, could there be some programs or outcomes that come from this? That's not I don't see that as our role, personally. I think our role is
wake
to
them up.
You know, can we serve as the platform for the discussion and the debate? I don't legislate.
Neither do they.
But I hope we can advocate for less about legislation and just more for visibility about these issues. I think that's what we can do. And I think a lot of good can come from shining a light on these areas and getting more people to understand what's happening in this industry. There's great careers, there's great market opportunities, there is global expansion, there's so many different things. And I kind of realize every day when I wake up, I kind of realize my job is I'm in information. And my job is to help people through the use of information run businesses.
Right.
And so I think if we stick to that and then perhaps work with some of these agencies to help promote some of the things that they could do, maybe that's the win.
Well, one of the things that we're very much aware of is that, you know, within the government or the framework of the government, you have those who say this, and then there are those who say that. We don't have jobs. Jobs have not come back. Well, the jobs have come back.
Yes, they have.
And a lot of them actually never even left.
Correct.
So there's a lot of misstatements that are being made to try and win a particular side.
Yep.
And that's not helpful.
Yeah.
It's not going to accomplish what we need.
I'll tell you in a related way, not from a government point of view, but we have a very close friend of ours, and she heads up basically the endowment, if you will, for a major junior college. It's called El Camino College out in Los Angeles. And this is at a port town. It's got a world-renowned manufacturing curriculum. So this is one of the better vocational type of programs you could possibly go through. When she's raising money, she can't get anybody to donate towards the manufacturing programs. Because big donors will say, well, manufacturing is not cool, it's not growing. I'll donate to like the business school, or I'll donate to the football team.
But that's so not true.
It is completely not true. But this is one of those things. This is where misperception is not just misperception. Misperception
Right.
is dangerous because it will
Absolutely.
become an economic reality if we don't, allow ourselves to open this up better and highlight it. And again, that's just a small example, but play that out.
Well, there's
you know.
there's another example, and we did see this and hear it in many of our travels around the country, where one of the biggest problems with regards to getting kids to buy into manufacturing was the parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
The parents, they didn't
Absolutely.
understand it. They didn't realize that your son or daughter can come out of school at age 19 or 20, be making $75,000 a year, or if you're an underwater welder, make $150,000 a
Absolutely.
year, and it's a cool job, it's
Yeah.
cool technology,
Yeah.
and they don't have a $200,000 college debt.
Well, in Lou, you and I have talked about this before, and Tim, I think you've been a part of this particular conversation as well. Several big, auditing and consulting organizations like Ernst & Young and those types have been looking at demographic differences between the baby boom generation and the millennial generation. 2017 was the first year in history that those two generations were of equal weight and size in the workforce at the same time. First time in history that is a generation the size of the baby boom generation has grown. So really interesting, and it doesn't mean the millennials are pushing boomers out. It means we have a really broad stretch of generational workforce today. The thing that's kind of interesting about that is some of these early studies believe they're starting to see the millennial generation getting dissatisfied with knowledge work. And it's somewhat kind of what you're touching on, but from a different angle. So,
Right.
At the end of the week, hey, so what'd you do at work this week? Oh, let me show you a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I did it.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. Right?
That's
Versus,
Yeah.
hey, I made something. I built something. Now,
Right.
these might be early little green shoots,
Right.
but I'm wondering if maybe as we reframe what's really happening in these industries, but there's also I need to tell you of all people, an incredible satisfaction of I actually did something.
Yeah.
I was joking around in a previous conversation. My career is divided exactly in half between pre and post internet. So the first half of my career was print and live events, and
Right.
the second half is internet.
Right.
My mother-in-law, God rest her soul, loved it when I was in the print business because she would say, "This is what my son-in-law does," and she would show someone a magazine, and she was so proud. When it went to the internet, she hated it because she couldn't explain it to anybody. They couldn't see it. So.
My father,
Right.
my father wanted me when I was in high school to go to he was a linotype operator, and
Yeah,
he wanted
yeah.
me to join the Big Six.
Yeah.
The typographical Big Six.
Yeah.
Father and son union, and I said, "Gee, Dad, I don't.
Right.
These aren't hands for ink.
Yeah.
Well,
And
but-
thank God.
Yeah,
Right?
because they don't exist
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
But
yeah.
he said, but they, European mentality. He said, but they can never take the trade away from
Think
you.
about it.
And
Yeah.
that was the way the Europeans
Absolutely.
from the 30s, 40s, 50s,
Yeah.
60s thought about it.
Yeah.
But boy, am I glad I didn't go for printing.
Well, listen, and I'm not, I'm not an expert on some of the regulatory issues and things like that, but we could learn a lot in these topics we're describing from European countries. Mm-hmm. If you go into Germany and other places, these are revered careers, and they're promoted.
Sure.
And the apprenticeship to vocational projects and stuff like that, and it's not surprising that you go there, the perceptions about the jobs are very different than they are here.
Well, not only that, their educational system is two-part.
Yeah.
It's educational, math, and
Yeah.
so on, and then they also teach you about shop and
Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
stuff, and it's a mandatory
Yeah.
event.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, there was another issue that I saw just recently, and this is a huge problem within manufacturing today about the opioids.
Yeah.
And how many people are dying and how many people are drugged and stoned when they go to work. We interviewed a woman, I don't remember her name at this point, but she went and she needed to hire 10 people, and 8 of them couldn't pass the drug test. But the other side of that coin, and this is kind of shocking, is that France cured the opioid problem. They have a system that they were training people with regards to the opioids, that within 2 years, opioid problem in France is gone.
Interesting.
I have the article, which I want to do a show on that.
Yeah.
Because here you listen to everybody about the opioid issue, and you can't get anybody.
Yeah.
And yet there are ways to deal with it.
Yeah.
But our country, our government is not doing it.
Well, I think your point on the education is an interesting one, and I think if you go back and study a lot of the things that happened post-World War II in this country, there was clearly a thought that the idea of what we think of as the manufacturing industry was going away. And if you looked at the data, you probably could have made that argument at that stage. And I think there was an overreaction to that.
Right.
These false narratives came out, education funding and programs shifted around, and I think now we realize, boy, we need a course correction here.
Yeah.
No two ways about it.
So, Tim, any final words before we wrap this up and we let this White House man go on the road again?
Well, depending on when this is viewed, Tony, you are, or Thomas is, going to be at the ISM conference, ISM 2019 in Houston. Are you going to be presenting some of this information there to the folks who are attending the supply chain component that may be slightly behind the digital curve?
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. I'm embarrassed to tell you, my speaking schedule gets scheduled out that I don't have a complete visibility into that, but I will find out and make sure you guys know. I think your clarion call to me is, hey, Tony, you need to share this data and information more broadly, and so we are looking for ways to do just that, and whether that's through some of these association events. We've started our own event tour out there, not to compete with other events, just to share it. So any suggestions of ways we could do that better, let me know.
Great.
Guys with Yellow Jackets is a great voice. Great voice.
Yeah.
Tony, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou.
And lots of luck for your trip to the White House.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Tim. Good to see you.
I'm now bragging to everybody.
Good with you, Tony.
I've been bragging to everybody that I know a guy who was at the White House. Remember that? The email?
Yeah. I love it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you, Lou.
And Tim, thank you for being here as usual. I see you're wearing a different type of shirt, but so am I, so we're even.
We got to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, well,
we call it manufacturing talk radio, except now it's manufacturing TV, and we're the talking heads.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.